Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our Autism Exploration series. My name is Emily. I'm the Clinical Director of Field Services here at Verbal Beginnings. Verbal Beginnings' mission is to change lives for both our clients, families, and our professionals. And we do that through our pledge of care, which is our promise to you to provide effective treatment through compassionate care. We also strive to achieve our mission through our core values. And one of our core values is education, which is teaching families valuable ways to work with your child. And that's really why we decided to start these series to begin with. And additionally, you'll see on this slide the seal for the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence and the seal from the Autism Commission on Quality. Both of these seals represent the hard work and focus that we place to ensure that VB is providing quality care through the highest standards. Next slide, please. I also wanted to take this opportunity and introduce you to the services that we offer here at Verbal Beginnings. In addition to our in-home and center-based ABA services, we also offer diagnostic services, therapy service, and social skills programming. And additionally, we have a couple housekeeping things. We encourage you to participate with us throughout the presentation by using the Q&A feature, which is found at the bottom of your screen. We also offer closed captioning during this recording, which you can access by navigating to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click the closed captioning button on the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce you to our presenter for the evening, Emily Summers, who will be presenting on navigating the IEP process. Emily, it's all yours.
Good evening. I'm Emily Summers, one of the clinical quality managers at Verbal Beginnings. I also currently serve as a clinical supervisor, seeing clients in the field sector of Verbal Beginnings. Prior to beginning my career as a behavior analyst, I was a pre-K special educator in Baltimore County Public Schools. As such, coordinating with school providers is a passion of mine, and I currently serve as a subject matter expert in the area of school coordination. Okay, let's get to it. An IEP is an individual education program. An IEP indicates a learner's eligibility for special education services in the school setting. The IEP outlines assessment results, present levels of performance, specific goals and objectives related to student needs in the school setting, any modifications or accommodations that are necessary for the student to access instruction, related services that are required to be provided to the student, eligibility for ESY services, and the location in which educational services will be provided. We're going to take a poll here to find out where our participants fall within the IEP process. We'll give about a minute for people to submit their responses. Okay, looks like that's just about everyone. A majority of the participants are currently in the IEP process. Your child, student, learner already has an IEP. It looks like 76% are yes and 24% are no. Do I click back? Oh, I don't want to get out of the presentation. Okay, so about 3/4 of the participants have learners who have IEP. So part of this process is going to feel familiar for you, but hopefully some of this review and just to focus on the current steps where you currently are will help you to feel more prepared for the school year. If we're beginning the process from the very beginning, we start with a referral. This referral can be made by an educational professional like a teacher or by a parent. The referral indicates a potential need for special education services in the school setting. And in order to determine eligibility, an assessment or a series of assessments, which is step 2, will be conducted. The eligibility step is a meeting with the school to review if a learner meets disability criteria for special education. To be eligible, a child must fit under at least one of 13 disability categories listed in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. If a student qualifies, parents or guardians and educators will meet for an initial IEP meeting to develop a plan. The result of the meeting is a detailed written description of a child's educational program. As the document, the IEP itself, is being created, parents and teachers will discuss the child's strengths, health, current performance, goals will be established, as will any need for assistive technology or different accommodations, including supports for teachers and assessments to track everything. During the initial IEP meeting, the IEP team gets together to review and sign the proposed plan. In step 6, we enter the ongoing service provision stage, which includes monitoring and reporting of learner performance. An annual review is held to review progress and to make any necessary updates. And then a full reassessment will occur at least every 3 years to determine continued eligibility. So in step 1, the student is referred for a formal evaluation, usually by a school personnel or a parent or guardian. The student's guardians must give written informed consent at that stage, at that step. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act protects the rights of students with disabilities to receive a public education. As a part of IDEA, all learners are entitled to a comprehensive evaluation of needs, which requires that parental approval. A written IEP developed by an entire team every year that contains measurable goals, any related services that will help the student benefit from special education, and education as close to home as possible. So throughout the presentation, you'll see some action items. I know that you are busy, you have a lot on your plates, but a few things that you can do to help ease the IEP process and really support the development of the IEP and your learner in the school setting. We have some actions along the way. So step 1 in the IEP process and referral, you can really start to familiarize yourself with special education law and rights. Procedural rights and safeguards is a document that's provided to parents at an IEP meeting. So this is a little before that step. But the procedural rights and safeguards, they do outline the parent and student's rights in the IEP process. A copy should be provided to the family in their primary language. It's said to be easy to digest, but you'll find that there is a lot of technical and legal jargon. Just, I think, the nature of it being so closely tied to legislation. But it is the school's way of providing you with information about your rights and special education law. So if that document itself doesn't feel accessible, find ways. There are tons of websites, Maryland public schools and things like that, that can outline your rights as a parent of a special needs learner or someone who is going through the IEP process. In the assessment step, assessments in each area of need are conducted to support that eligibility and to inform the development of the IEP. So more closely outlines student strengths and needs. Evaluation should not be fully dependent on test scores. So there are often some observation reports included in the assessment. Other forms of evaluations would be informal assessment, student input, parent input should complement test scores in order to make appropriate informed decisions about the student's needs. Assessments must be completed and the team must meet to review the assessments within 60 days from the date parental consent for the assessment was signed. There are a couple important timelines along the way. So in the eligibility step, we're specifically looking at, does the student have a disability, an educational disability that's outlined in one of those 13 disability categories? And does that disability affect the student's academic or functional performance to such an extent that she or he requires special education services? If the answer to both of these questions is yes, the student is considered eligible for special education services. and the process continues. For the initial IEP meeting, a few action items that you might consider would be to prepare for the meeting by writing a list of issues that are important to your family. So thinking about, family values, reviewing any documents that are sent home, like a draft copy of the IEP, assessment reports, the prior written notice, and the participant list. I think that's an important one as well. If you recognize that a participant who is expected to be a part of the IEP meeting, if they are not listed, then it's important to reach out and kind of ask questions about, why is this professional or participant not going to attend the meeting? The team must meet to develop the IEP within 30 days of the eligibility meeting. And parental consent is required for the school to begin providing special education services. So at the point of the initial IEP meeting, a parent signature is required in order for services to begin. Okay, a couple more poll questions here. Do you have a system for preparing for IEP team meetings? And again, I'll give it about a minute. I'd like to get as much feedback as possible. Currently about 60-40, 60% responding no specific system and 40% identifying that they've got a system in place for preparing for IEP team meetings. Responses are slowing down. That might be all we're going to get. So about 60-40. I think that's a pretty good distribution. Do I set the next poll question? Aha, okay. And then one more that's kind of related. Do you feel comfortable expressing your family values to school providers, to any providers, but especially in this case, considering IEP team members? So far, we have a strong showing of yes at about 90% and 10% no. Okay. So we landed at 89% yes and 11% no. And I think that that's an important consideration. If not a specific plan for preparing for meetings, how can you increase your, this just popped back up again, level of comfort with expressing family values? Okay, here we're entering the ongoing service provision step of the process. Throughout the school year, the calendar year, after the IEP is written, the goals and objectives are addressed through identified services and the utilization of the accommodations that were identified as necessary. So all the things that are supposed to be occurring are occurring within the school setting. This part of the process is truly occurring out of the parent or caregiver's view, but you should be able to connect with providers for updates regarding IEP implementation outside of IEP meetings. It's important to refer to the communication requirements that are sometimes outlined in the supplemental aids and services to determine if providers are communicating in a way and on a frequency which is recommended on the IEP. There is, sometimes the homeschool communication is outlined that it will occur monthly, weekly, daily. If you recognize that there's no clear indication of how frequently providers should be communicating with you, then that's something that you can really suggest or request at the next meeting. Again, the supports and services that are outlined on the IEP should support the learner's access to services in the school setting. And sometimes homeschool communication can really be a big part of that. Generally speaking, you're going to get a quarterly progress report, which is written. It usually comes alongside some sort of maybe a report card. But in addition to that, you can check in with the providers directly to see what they are able to do to give you additional information about the implementation of the IEP. The IEP must state how parents will be informed of the progress on the IEP goals. So even a quarterly progress report will be listed. It's below the goals and objectives. It will just, how will parents be notified about progress report, how frequently, quarterly. I would say that's kind of the standard, but you should look to specifically identify what is expected to be provided for your child. School-based providers should be adjusting the services based upon learner progress toward mastery of IEP goals. So the progress monitoring, that data analysis that's so familiar to BCBAs and ABA service providers that really guides our treatment. It's a little different in the school setting, of course, but the progress made toward IEP goals should really be pushing the educator to either continue with their instruction in the same way or make some instructional adjustments. The annual review must occur within 12 months following the development of the previous IEP. You're going to meet on a yearly basis, on an annual basis, at least, to review the plan, update the plan. Okay, can you identify at least one way that you can prepare for the annual IEP meeting? So this is going to help you kind of develop that specific action plan. If you can set, one goal for yourself. Okay, so far, prepare a list of questions or priorities as in the lead. And I think that's important, even if you just write it down in the notes feature of your phone, anything that you've been kind of wondering about, specific questions about goals and objectives. Why is this important for the learner? Expressing what you're working on in other settings so that maybe there can be, some additional focus in those areas to support learner growth. So that was about 53% prepare a list of questions or priorities. At 21%, we have read documents. It's a lot and they can be hard to navigate, but especially looking at things like proposed goals and objectives, progress, the present levels of academic and functional performance, usually reviews the assessment results, and the supplemental aids and services can really be helpful to know what does this educational support package look like. We also have review prior written notice at about 11% of the participants opting for that one, especially looking at that attendee list, seeing if the people who you want to see at the table will be there. And then 16% identified reviewing the procedural rights and safeguards. And again, that's that document that's going to review the legal requirements and some more of the special education law. Some other things that you can do are to complete a values assessment for your family so that you know how you can clearly express your values at the IEP meeting. That's a little off the beaten path in terms of the more objective ways to prepare. This could be a helpful way to express things that are important for your family at the IEP table. The reevaluation must occur at least once every 3 years. This will likely involve a complete battery of tests, including academic, cognitive, potentially a phys ed assessment, maybe fine motor, speech and language, or occupational therapy, in order to determine continued eligibility for services. So at least every 3 years, this complete battery of tests is occurring. They are obligated to complete assessments upon parent request. So if you go in and you say, I really want to know the updated assessment scores for this assessment, and you can provide that rationale of why it's really critical that the assessment be conducted again, they will provide that for you. So any questions about the IEP process? Those steps: referral, assessment, eligibility, initial IEP development, implementation, progress monitoring.
I haven't seen any questions come through yet, but one that might be good to just touch upon is how somebody or a family member that's going through the IEP process here can maybe leverage their current support. So if they have a behavior analyst on their clinical team, for example, working with them within the home setting, how can they leverage having that support within the IEP process itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think if you're able to bring the BCBA on as a member of the IEP team, then that coordination just becomes a bit more comfortable for all parties. I can't say that if you go into the IEP team meeting and you say, well, the BCBA or another outside provider believes that this is important. It's not always going to go over because they are separate and different instructional settings. I think first developing a positive relationship, as to the extent that you can, with your different providers is important. And then, when you propose that coordination and collaboration, or make suggestions based upon what other providers have said, they might be received in a manner that in fact benefits the learner. I do talk a bit more about the coordination process between BCBAs and school providers. So we will get more in depth with that. So in IDEA, parents are defined in a number of ways and may include biological parents, step parents, and adoptive parents. This includes anyone serving in place of a biological parent, such as other family members like grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, cousins, guardians, foster parents, or court-appointed surrogate parents. And then other individuals are listed, and who are they? May be related service personnel that provide discipline-specific expertise beyond that of the classroom or special education teacher, like physical therapy, speech language pathology, occupational therapist. Maybe a child family advocate speaks out on behalf of the parents or the student. There could be community members that provide important information about priorities, the child's strengths and needs, as well as information about cultural and developmental appropriateness of goals and intervention strategies. So you should not feel limited when you get to the IEP meeting or table that the team is not representative. Language interpreters aid communication between educators and the family when appropriate as well. So an action item here is, again, to review that participant list and identify if someone who you feel is imperative, to participate in the team. A necessary participant is not listed on the IEP team invite or does not attend the meeting. It's your right to have these participants at every IEP meeting. So say there's, specifically a concern with participation in specials like music, PE, art, things like that. You'll want to have those providers as teachers, the art teacher present to discuss how things are going. Okay, so here are some concerns that may arise and hopefully some solutions or suggestions. What if the school does not want to hold an IEP meeting? So outside of the mandatory, annual review or the 3-year reevaluation, the triennial evaluation or assessment, the parent can call a meeting at any time. But what if you feel a little concerned, like, well, the school's not going to want to hold the meeting? You should make sure that the school system holds the IEP team meeting to which you are invited so that you can fully review and participate in the development of the child's program. So, if you feel like there are things occurring in the IEP process that you are not aware of, then you need to make sure that those changes are being taken care of at an IEP team meeting. So request the meeting. It's your right to have the meeting. You may need to provide some rationale of why it's important at this time, but recognizing that you are able to call that IEP meeting. The school will have to schedule it, which could take a little bit, but making sure that you kind of have your ducks in a row and that you're prepared at that point. What if your concern is that there is a request by the school to excuse certain members of the IEP team? You do not have to agree that those members could be excused. You can express your desire to have all members of the team present. So they might try to ask, is it okay if the assistant principal or IEP case manager or general educator is not present? And if you feel strongly that that's an important member of the team, you could say, I'd like to reschedule when this member can participate. It's really important to me and to the student and their education and their IEP process that these imperative participants are present. Maybe you feel concerned that you'll feel pressured to agree to everything quickly. So IEP team meetings usually have a beginning and end time. They're usually, kind of cranking them out. There are a lot of learners with special needs in different school settings. The IEP team meetings, in my experience, were, all on Thursdays, and we just kind of ran them back to back to back. But if you are worried that you'll feel pressured to agree to everything quickly at the table during, the school's timeline, you can ask the team to go over the draft IEP item by item so that you feel like you are willing and ready to agree to everything, especially if you reviewed it prior and you have some specific questions. Since the document is a draft until you're at the IEP team meeting, when it's reviewed, you can request that necessary changes are made. So you might feel nervous that you have to agree to everything, but this is not a finalized copy of the document that you're reviewing at the IEP team meeting. This is still a draft. This is still a proposed copy. So you can say, I have questions about this item on this page. I don't know what it means. I wish that it was worded differently. And coordinating with other outside professionals can help you to come up with some of those questions, or bring your attention to some specific items that maybe you might overlook. But you don't have to agree to everything on the school's timeline during that meeting if you feel unsure, and they shouldn't finalize it without you. So you shouldn't feel pressured to agree to everything if you feel rushed. If the concern is that you'll run out of time during the meeting, you can ask to schedule a follow-up meeting. So you don't feel like X, Y, and Z that were on your list of priorities were addressed during this meeting. We have to meet again in order to address these concerns. Finally, maybe there's a concern that you might not agree with IEP goals, services, accommodations, things that are proposed at the meeting. If this is the child's first IEP or the initial IEP, the school system cannot start providing special education and related services without your informed written consent. So going through the document with you and having you sign. However, if this isn't your child's first IEP, the school system can go ahead, if you've signed off on an initial, and this is an annual, down the road, The IEP team can go ahead and implement the IEP without your signature unless you request a due process hearing. So if they say, okay, we have not come to an agreement, we're going to continue to provide the services that we outlined on the IEP, and you are not in agreement, your next step would be to request a due process hearing or maybe mediation. If possible, it's always a good idea to try other less formal ways to resolve disagreements or concerns that you have with the proposed IEP before pursuing the due process hearing. And that could be, can we review this further? Can we make the adjustments that, or can we come to a compromise on some of these adjustments that I'm suggesting or requesting? Can we schedule another meeting? So you can rest assured that each school district has a compliance office. The office assisting schools and parents with compliance issues and or situations regarding the students and special education process. So the compliance office really is generally working with families to provide technical support in understanding and accessing their procedural safeguards. The compliance office is also safeguarding the rights of students with disabilities by providing professional development and technical support to schools regarding compliance and provision of special education services to students with disabilities. They assist with developing and conducting internal compliance monitoring activities. So going in and kind of auditing to ensure that compliance with IEP requirements is occurring across the school system. The compliance office facilitates and assists with statewide compliance monitoring activities. So on a school system level, like Baltimore County Public Schools or another local district, they will have a compliance office that's auditing Baltimore County practices, and they're also assisting in statewide audits. The compliance office facilitates the processes available to parents to appeal special education decisions related to their child, including mediation, disputing resolution meetings, and moving forward with due process hearings. The compliance office supports the facilitated IEP process, which provides trained facilitators to facilitate ongoing communication and collaboration between families and school staff to reach consensus during IEP meeting process. So they are a nice support when families might feel like their hands are tied. If you are concerned about the implementation of IEP services within the school district, or the state, the compliance office really should be aware and conducting these audits of special education practices. Mediation is a hearing before an impartial third party. So if you don't agree with any component of the IEP, you could go to mediation, which is not the due process hearing, and just kind of state your case in front of an impartial third party. This can include whether a child is eligible for special education services or not. So a mediation could occur at the very beginning of the IEP process. As a parent, you're the most knowledgeable about your child, and you can provide valuable information to educators and other IEP team members about your child. So each member of the team brings important information to the table. I hope that it doesn't feel like it's providers or school professionals versus parents. It really is meant to be a collaborative process. Of course, we have to trust that the educators, across the board in the school setting, general educators, special educators, related service providers, anyone who's present, has the child's best interest in mind as well. But they're also familiar with what is reasonable within the school setting. So it's especially important to consider their input, even if a parent is the expert on the specific learner. So coordination of care would be that collaboration between providers. In this case, we're specifically looking at BCBA or, a client's in-home ABA therapy provider and the school providers. Coordination of care is a required component of ABA therapy provision. So as a child receiving ABA therapy, they are going to receive coordination of care between their provider and the school system. What that looks like, may be different across the board, but your child's clinical supervisor or BCBA will outline a detailed plan for coordination with other providers in the treatment plan. So within the treatment plan, it will say, the BCBA will coordinate with school providers via email or observation if necessary, every quarter, every month, 4 times a year. They can kind of specify it however they like. Coordination could include phone calls, emails, observations in the school setting, and in some cases, attending IEP team meetings. There are some insurance restrictions with attending IEP team meetings, so it's not always an option for the BCBA to attend, but it's always worth a shot to ask. Coordination of care for something that's not covered by insurance might look more like email and phone calls, things that are more accessible. If it's deemed to be a critical part of treatment or special education, then an observation should be conducted. And that can be something that's, determined on a case-by-case basis. What's the purpose of coordination of care? Coordination of care contributes to a learner's success across environments. So we don't want the skills that are developed or demonstrated in ABA therapy to live just in ABA therapy. We want to make sure that those skills are generalized and can branch out to other environments, other instructors, other materials. And one way to check to see if things have generalized is to be in contact with these other providers. A multidisciplinary team of professionals can share effective strategies or methods, align targets for improved acquisition, avoid duplication of efforts and confusion for the learner, provide additional learning opportunities throughout the day or week, and support generalization and maintenance of skills. So it can be really cool to coordinate closely with another provider, say speech therapist who's working in a school setting, to align targets. So, what are you guys currently working on? Oh, well, we're working on, the client requesting information using what, asking what questions during the session. And the speech therapist says, oh, well, I was going to start with when, but you know what, since you're working on what, I'll go with what as well. And we can check back in a few weeks to see, how things are progressing. Similarly, it can avoid duplication of efforts. So maybe it's a situation where instruction should live with a particular provider rather than with another, in order to avoid confusion from the learner. So if, 2 separate, different instructional procedures were going to be proposed or utilized by the different providers, that could be confusing for the learner. So developing a relationship and coordinating consistently can be important to determine, is it better or worse to align our targets and instructional programming? Aligning instruction will certainly offer additional opportunities for that responding and learning throughout the day or week. So it can be a really effective way to improve responding to instruction. The BCBA's role in coordination. The BCBA can propose useful and effective strategies for skill acquisition or behavior management to school providers. Generally speaking, the BCBA will wait to be asked for that assistance. But if we recognize that something's, glaring and really challenging or difficult for the learner in the school setting, and we have a solution that has worked, I think it's worth suggesting, hey, we've tried this and we've used this visual and it works great. It seems like something that you guys would be able to use effectively in the school. The BCBA can review IEP documentation, assessment reports, progress reports to outline concerns for parents. So maybe just taking a separate critical look at the documentation and saying, well, this feels a little concerning, or why weren't we able to make progress here? And that can help you to prepare for the IEP meeting. Coordination should be a positive experience for all members of the learner's educational team. So again, it's not this person versus this person, or that this service is more effective than that one. How can we all come together with our knowledge of the learner across these different contexts to support the learner for improved outcomes? What's the parent role in coordination? The parent will inform the BCBA of any and all changes among providers. So school professionals, if the learner transitions to a new school, if there's a change in the speech provider, OT, physical therapy, if they start an outside therapy that was not previously in place. It's also imperative that the parents sign the approval for use and disclosure form for all providers upon BCBA request. That will give us the opportunity, or the authorization, consent to communicate with these providers. The parent can connect the BCBA with other providers via email. Tends to be the easiest way to get in touch. If coordination lives there, then the parent can be copied on ongoing communication. But there's a chance that coordination transforms into phone calls, emails, observations. And the family can share draft and finalized copies of reports and other important documents. And the parent can solicit feedback from all professionals involved in the learner's instruction. So, how is the learner doing in this setting, in that setting, in this setting? Can you think of anything, school provider, can you think of anything that we could work on during our in-home ABA therapy? Or BCBA, can you think of anything that would help the school providers with transitions to the cafeteria? So really just kind of getting that feedback and being a conduit for the ongoing coordination and collaboration. All right, questions, or we can open this up to discussion.
I have a couple questions that came through while you were presenting.
Do my best.
So one of the first questions I have here is, are IEP assessments conducted online or in person?
Oh, I am out of touch with the school system, such that I don't know if they're starting to share some assessments online. I wonder if you're referring to like parent questionnaires, or if the student is participating in assessments that are conducted online. I would think, and again, a little out of touch since I've been a BCBA now for 6 years, but I would think that maybe some parent questionnaires are sent to be completed online, but the assessment should be direct and conducted with the learner.
Awesome.
I think it depends on the specific assessment, and you should be able to access the assessment names on the IEP, and then maybe you could just put that in your Google search bar and figure out like what exactly is involved with this assessment.
Awesome. Thank you. I have 2 more questions for you so far. This one is specifically asking what type of evaluation or assessments should be included within, your typical IEP process, which I know might vary. But this person specifically asked at every third reassessment. So if their kiddo is coming up on their 3rd year of having an IEP, is there any specific assessments that they should be looking for?
Another good question. I think it is specific to the learner, but I do believe that we're looking for that continued eligibility piece. So some diagnostic tool for confirming that the learner still meets the eligibility criteria or the disability criteria. Generally speaking, and I don't know if this is a requirement or best practice, but the term just escaped me. Psychologists would usually be involved every 3 years for that triennial assessment to look at cognitive skills.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the next question I have would be, how would we know that an IEP is being implemented? So, for example, what type of data or reports should they ask for aside from a progress report?
That's a good question. I can say as a former teacher, and I've always loved data, but the graphs and things that we use consistently in ABA are not consistently a part of every educator's toolbox. So that the goals are written in a way that they can be observed and measured, similar to ABA, but the criteria for mastery are not as stringent. So I think that the reports, they only have to see things a few times in order to say that a particular skill is mastered. So I think you could ask your specific teacher what information they can provide to you. And if you are a data person like me, specifically asking for that, I don't know if you'll get it. But at least like a subjective report of how things are going is better than nothing. Yeah, I think it's worth it to advocate for what you're looking for. And if it's really just not feasible for the teacher to have any graphs or, a visual display, then kind of ask what can they provide to you, which again might just kind of be like an anecdotal report of things are improving. They should have some data to back up the progress reports, and determining if a goal of mastery or progress is being made. But outside of that, it's hard to get data from school professionals.
Thank you. I actually have another question that came through while you were answering that one. So this individual asked, what, if any, suggestions do you have about if somebody finds out, a family member finds out that at the end of the school year, their child did not receive any of the services that were indicated in the IEP for that school year? Are there any specific strategies that you'd recommend, or kind of within the same vein, if they are concerned about the type of services that their child is currently receiving or quote unquote receiving?
Right. Yeah, I think scheduling an IEP team meeting at the beginning of the school year is critical, and expressing those concerns, identifying and working with the team to identify any barriers to providing the services. I mean, this is a legal document, so they have to be providing the services that are outlined. So discussing with the IEP team what you understand did or did not occur within the last school year. And if the IEP team isn't able to come up with solutions, I think moving on to that compliance office, expressing your concerns to a separate but related provider in the school system.
Awesome. I don't have any other questions as it stands right now, but we'll give a couple. Let's just give another, minute or two for some other people to add some questions to the Q&A box. Again, you can add those questions in the bottom of your toolbar where there's the Q&A feature. Feel free to type in any questions that you might have. And then Emily, in the meantime, while people are potentially typing in some questions, do you mind flipping to that last slide so I can introduce the topic for our autism explorations for next month? So if this is your first time here, welcome. We're so excited that you joined us this evening to learn about how to navigate the IEP process. We host these every month on typically the first or second Tuesday of the month from 5 to 6. And our next month's presentation, we're really excited about as well. It'll be on the practical applications of comprehensive sex and relationship education, which is hosted by two of our amazing clinicians at Verbal Beginnings. We have Erin and Leia who will be presenting on this. And if you have been around for a while, they presented on a part 1 version of this last year. So this is sort of the second part to all of that. So hopefully you're able to tune in and join us for next month as well. It'll be a great topic to discuss. And And I haven't seen any other questions roll in, so I think we're going to wrap things up. And this is a recorded version, so we will be able to get this recorded version live sent out to you guys, so you have it as a resource to you. Emily, I want to thank you so much for this awesome presentation, for walking us all through the different processes involved with the IEP process itself, and just kind of walking us through some helpful tips and tricks to navigating all the things that's involved with it, since it can be so overwhelming and so complex. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.